What's up, everyone? This is Zach with the Guardians of Liberty, and I am joined by my host, Nathan Parada, who is a little under the weather on this nasty weather day here in Nebraska.
Yeah, working outside in the rain all day does not work for my health.
And we are joined today by our special guest, Rex Lawhorn, who is running for governor of Oklahoma, which, of course, is our old rival here in Nebraska. So welcome, Sooner, to the Big Red Nation. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
So I've been busting my butt since I got off at 5:30 just to get my computer up and running because I really haven't finished moving. My new room is still kind of echoey because we haven't really done that. So everyone at home, I apologize for my echoey video and sound quality. But that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about your run for governor and all the cool things that are going on in Oklahoma. So you were just explaining to us that the benchmark for how you guys keep your ballot access has been lowered. I didn't know that, so I assume a lot of other people don't know that. Do you want to explain that process real quick?
Sure. Oklahoma used to have, if not the most, one of the top 3 most restrictive ballot access laws in the nation. It requires getting 10% of the total number of votes cast in the previous gubernatorial and presidential election, which means you've got to get somewhere 60,000 votes in a state of 4.1 million people. So it's very, very hard to get on the ballot. But then on top of that, they compounded it by requiring you to continue to get a 10% in either the gubernatorial or presidential election. Well, Oklahoma's kind of in flyover country, as they like to call it everywhere else, so we don't get a lot of presidential candidates that come spend a whole lot of campaigns here, especially in the third parties where the resources are relatively limited. So you're heavily reliant on the volunteers of the state to get a 10% vote for a candidate from a party that has never been to your state and a party that your state has never heard of and has no idea what you're about. So in 2012, we got reformed and we tried to get Gary Johnson on the ballot. The Libertarian Party didn't make ballot access in 12, so they had to wait until 2016, but we laid a lot of groundwork in order to get the ballot access laws changed so that we would be able to retain it once we actually got it. We got recertified in early 2016, and Gary was our nominee, and he wound up getting 5 and some change percent here in Oklahoma. And through the groundwork that was laid before, the retention requirement got lowered to 2.5%. So he more than doubled what it was. And we were able to retain it. This is actually going to be the first time in the history of the state that Oklahoma's going to have a libertarian candidate on the ballot for governor. And
that's awesome.
This is the first time since 1938 that there's been a third-party primary of any variety.
Is that for the governor, or is that a different primary?
That's for the governor, yes.
Okay. I didn't know you were having a primary. I guess. There
are actually 2 other candidates running as well.
Okay. Well, we won't dive into that right now. We'll leave that for later. They can come bug us if they want equal treatment.
So that's some great news to hear that they actually lowered the requirements for you to stay on the ballot in Oklahoma. Because I kept seeing over the years that Oklahoma would be constantly left off the ballot access left. I think it was you in Ohio that had the most stringent laws, and they would always be the last places to gain access. So what was the struggle to get that access back? I mean, you guys didn't get the 10% from Gary Johnson, so what was the process to actually make that a reality?
Well, I tell you what, it's been 16 years since the Libertarians were on the ballot in the state of Oklahoma, and it was mostly because they weren't organized. The organization, as it existed prior to the Oklahoma Libertarian Party, was kind of a coffee shop group where they like to get together and talk about philosophy and talk about policy, but weren't really interested in taking any further action. And then Ron Paul kind of revolutionized that And there were a lot of Ron Paul Republicans that saw an opportunity for a Liberty Party in Oklahoma, said, hey, let's go steal the Libertarian Party. Well, they didn't have to steal it. We just kind of handed it over to them because we weren't organized and weren't doing anything. I myself wasn't part of the organization just because they weren't on the ballot, and I am almost strictly an electoral activist. So I work with politicians, I work with the legislators on policy, that sort of thing. So the vast majority of us that were libertarians working in the state were working through the other two parties to try to push a more libertarian agenda. Well, the Ron Paul revolution came in and said, hey, we're going to take this and we're going to make it a liberty organization. We're going to actually try to have some electoral success. And once they went through all the trouble to get it formulated, and you know all the peripheral action it took to get the legislative action done, 2016, they petitioned for, and you've got to get those petitions in like a window of 3 months. It's a very short amount of time that you have to get the signatures. So through contributions from the National Party and the people here in Oklahoma getting out there and getting the job done, combined with a lot of help from the 788 crowd, which is the medical marijuana crowd here. We got the petition pushed through and got it all done, and everything, we got it. And then Gary got the 5.7, which is above the 2.5 threshold, which is the new threshold that was set after the other work that was done by two outside organizations. So it's just been a coming together of multiple different organizations that finally got the party up and running and then stable to where we could retain ballot access and keep moving forward with some electoral success.
So in Nebraska, our libertarians are a lot different than, say, California libertarians or
Sure.
New York libertarians. What issues are the most important to Oklahoma libertarians? Because I know you guys have a really high military veteran, because I was in Fort Sill when I was in the Army. Yeah, Lawton sucks, by the way. It's the rudest people on the planet.
Forgive him, Megan.
But so what kind of libertarians does Oklahoma have, kind of as a general rule?
It's very interesting. If you want to study the evolution of any political party, come to Oklahoma and look at the Oklahoma Libertarian Party, because we have pulled people from all sides of the spectrum. We've got marijuana legalization people, we've got immigration rights people, we've got hardcore economic libertarians. There is no one faction that dominates the Oklahoma Libertarian Party as to what kind they are. We've been kind of a home for misfit single issue people that can't find a home in either one of the old parties. And they didn't like being independent, right? Because the independents aren't organized at all. So anybody that's wanting to push a libertarian message in the state of Oklahoma, find their way here, regardless of what their priority issue is. And I've been really proud of the fact that we've had people from the far left and far right, and they come together and they work hand in hand in order to push both of their issues. And I think that part of that is because that we have been so outnumbered and so oppressed for so long that we recognize the importance for unity. And by and large, the state has come together, regardless of what faction they came from. So if I was going to say, if you were going to pigeonhole Oklahoma libertarians, they would be generic libertarians in the fact, if you are going to push liberty, you are our friend.
Awesome. Now, it's funny that you brought up marijuana legalization, because I would believe it was Oklahoma and Nebraska that tried to sue Colorado over their legalization a couple years back.
Utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, it was so crazy. But so what inspired you specifically to run for governor of Oklahoma?
Well, the fact that we needed a voice. I've been active in politics for a very long time. I've been a Democrat and a Republican, both, depending on what issues were important in the national scene at the time. But this particular cycle, there was a calling for it. Gary Johnson's team here in Oklahoma needed someone to keep pushing, because we were concerned about ballot access with Gary. And when we first started this campaign, we were still worried about ballot access. So, we needed someone who looked right, who could speak right, who was knowledgeable of the issues, so on and so forth, et cetera, because we thought initially that we were really going to be struggling for the 2.5%. And at the time they were recruiting, I didn't step forward for it, but I was probably, one of the only people that were active in the Libertarian Party at the time that fit the profile for someone who could carry that kind of ballot access. And that's what it was. They convinced me, yeah, I would say, what about this person? What about that person? And they had legitimate reasons why they weren't the right call. So they asked me to, and I said, yeah, I'll bite that bullet. I'll do it for the party I've been fighting for.
Awesome. If you were to pick the 3 biggest issues in Oklahoma right now that you're running to fix, what would they be?
Education, economic diversity, medical marijuana / criminal justice reform. And those aren't just the 3 issues that I'm picking. Those are the 3 issues in the state of Oklahoma right now. As far as the education system is concerned, we spend at 38th in the nation in our public school system, and we perform at 48th in the nation in our public school system. It's an antiquated system that uses a heavy administrative burden, and it takes a lot of money out of the classroom. Our teachers are getting ready to walk out because they haven't had a raise in 10 years. The Republicans control our legislature right now, and they are just way out of control. About a third of them are actually Democrats that switched over to run as Republicans, because you don't run for office in Oklahoma and expect to win unless there's an R by your name. That was as of 2 years ago.
You guys like with you guys have like a House and a Senate at the state level, right? Like,
yes, we are bicameral.
Okay, so do you allow your politicians at that level to run as their party? Because we don't really do that here.
Yes, every position in our state is partisan, with the exception of city and county, and judges are nonpartisan as well. Okay. So everybody is partisan.
Wow, every position.
Everyone, yes.
That's good. So we have our unicameral. Like I think we're the only ones, right?
We're the only ones.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
we are the only unicameral legislature in the country.
Okay. Well, so to me, it's kind of weird that other people have like partisan state politics. Obviously, partisanship is part of our state politics too. It's right. Not a secret what these people are personally, but we don't get voting blocks as badly as other states do, I think, because of it.
I agree with you, and it's not as much of a problem here as it used to be, simply because the Republicans are so fractured and they control 3/4 of the legislature. And with them,
that's huge.
Yeah, it's almost a European style government right now, where everybody is just every man for himself and isn't really representing any type of platform. It's chaos. It's maddening. It really is.
So let's get back. Let's get back to the 3 issues that you mentioned. Why are those the most important, and what do you plan on doing to fix them?
Well, they are the most important because they are the 3 issues that touch nearly every family in the state of Oklahoma, and all 3 of them are in a disastrous condition. What I'm planning to do about it is I'm going to fix all 3 of them, and I'm going to do it easily. The education system is a 1920s industrial model that, like I said, relies heavily on an administrative burden. We've got 527 school districts. Most states, proportionally with our population, have somewhere between 200 and 220. And that's simply because here in Oklahoma, if you have a town, you have a superintendent, and that superintendent makes a lot of money and makes a lot of political donations. So there's not really an impetus from the legislature or from the executive branch to make the reforms that are necessary. By itself, I'm going to drop our administrative burden from 55% to between 40 and 45%, which is going to free up a lot of money to go back into the classroom, which is going to go to our teachers, which is going to resolve the teacher pay issue. And then I'm going to address the other issue with education, which is that the state likes to control the curriculum in the classroom. Matter of fact, one of the Republican candidates for governor right now submitted a bill several years ago that tried to specify what was going to be taught in every history class. And he listed something like 43, 45 documents that had to make up the core of this history class, and at the same time wanted to remove advanced placement history classes from Oklahoma high schools because they didn't teach what he thought they should teach. So that's the type of mentality that we have in our Republican and Democratic leadership here, is like total control. And I'm going to completely reverse that. I mean, clearly the Board of Education is an executive branch, and they don't report to the governor, but they serve at the leisure of the governor. So they probably had better pay attention if they want to maintain their position. And I'm going to push that control back down to the local level and allow the teachers to do their job and teach the students.
So I was homeschooled. So maybe I just don't get this at all. How the hell do you have a 55% administration cost? Like that, so that's 55% of the education budget is administration?
That's correct.
And how?
You have way too many superintendents maintaining way too many district offices, maintaining way too gaudy buildings, having crony contracts at the local level. Oh, I'm going to pay you $100,000 to do this new facade because we've been friends since we were children. There's a lot of that goes around. So there are a lot of funds that get wasted, not only in salary and, internal administration, but a lot of it gets funneled out to friends of the people that are in charge of the budgets. And it's something that's not looked at because it's really weird, because at one point we want to say we're going to impose all of these rules on you, and then on the other hand they're going to say, but we're not going to make sure that you follow any of them. That's up to your school board. And so the combination of the two has given them a freedom down there to abuse our students to the point that our education system might as well not even exist as it is today.
Yeah, I think this is a very good point to make, because a lot of the time when you hear about education reform, people are just talking about let's spend more money. Right. And that's as deep as the solution goes.
And you're exactly right. That's the narrative that's going on here right now.
Yeah, and when it doesn't matter how much money you spend when literally half of it is going towards bureaucrats that you don't need. Yep. So it's not a spending issue per se. It's where that spending is going that's the big problem. It's the fact that there's no accountability on where those funds are ending up. And so you end up with teachers not getting raises when they should be, and an ever-growing bureaucracy to oversee it all that, quite frankly, is not necessary.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the situation you just described sums it up nicely. Exactly
and then, of course, the taxpayers are always asked to just, put up with more taxes in order to pay for an ever-expanding bureaucracy. And then when the education doesn't actually get any better, they all wondering where is our tax dollars going, and the only solution ever given is just to spend more. Yeah,
and it's a horrible issue, because even if you're taking our entire state budget overall, our $22 billion budget, well, that's total expenditures in the state. But if you take our state budget, over half of it goes just to education. And that includes K through 12 and higher education. That's another place where we've got money that we're just throwing away. We subsidize our higher education to the tune of $800 million a year. We just give our higher education system $800 million a year and don't dictate where that money has to go. So they're spending it on things like international cooperatives and increasing scholarships to out-of-state students and lowering out-of-state tuition. And I'm like, that is $800 million of Oklahoma taxpayer money that you are just giving away to other states and other countries. That needs to be spent here if we're going to spend it at all. I'm suggesting we just take all that back and let them get rid of all that. And they're like, oh, but we've got to have all of those out-of-state students because, they're high-quality students. And they bring so much to the state of Oklahoma. I said, no, it doesn't, because our economy is in such a poor condition that when they're done getting educated here, they go somewhere else to go find a job to use the education that you just gave them for free.
I was just going to say, I don't recall Oklahoma having a very good economy when I was down there. And, that's been like 7 years now, but it didn't so let's touch on that. What does Oklahoma do economically? Like what kind of jobs are there? Is it like oil, agriculture? Okay.
Oil and gas. Our big three are oil and gas, aerospace, and the movie industry. Believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, and we don't. There's not that many jobs in the movie industry. There's also a lot of agriculture, but they're not in high favor with the legislature. We don't take care of our farmers at all. But yeah, most of the people, if you're
That's
to say
such a foreign idea to us.
Yeah, no
yeah,
kidding.
right.
Yeah, Nebraska loves its farmers. That's kind of the calling card of Nebraska.
Well, see, and that's the sad thing is that Oklahoma loves its farmers also. We love our farmers, we love our ranchers, but the legislature doesn't. And they make it harder and harder and harder to get by as a family farm every year. And it's to the point, I think we just recently turned over like 2 years ago to where we have more major corporate farms than we do family farms that are owned locally here in the state of Oklahoma. Like Tyson Chicken or Cargill Beef or any of the other large corporations, they buy or rent farms here in Oklahoma used for their production. So they use our land, our resources to produce goods that we don't get the benefit of because they take that corn, over to Arkansas or up into Kansas to feed their cows in their feedlots. So we don't see the economic benefits even of what our farmers are producing. And it's a curse. Our oil and gas has dominated the political landscape in Oklahoma for so long that they have pretty much starved every other industry out of anything. And they've done that through taxation. They've done it through favorable tax policies for the oil and gas industry as a whole. And then on top of that, they give tax exemptions and tax subsidies to the oil and gas industry to account for the ever lowering cost of the barrel of oil. Well, it's now gotten to the point where oil is so low in value that we're going to have to continue to subsidize these guys while we're running an $800 million budget deficit. And they've done nothing to do anything to diversify our economy, to expand our economy. That's the other thing. Our two big industries, aerospace and oil and gas, they're both cyclical industries. They operate on a boom-bust cycle. So every 2 to 3 years, our oil and gas people were unemployed for a year. Every 3 to 5 years, our aerospace people are unemployed for a year because once Boeing fills that big contract, they have to wait a year before the next big contract gets negotiated and construction begins. And it got to the point now, American Airlines pulled out of here about a decade ago. And so the industries that we rely on for the vast majority of our revenue are dying industries here. And we're not doing anything to bring in new industries. The front-running Republican is calling for increasing our exports and creating new international markets for our goods. And it's like, well, what the hell, Mr. Lamb? We're already exporting every single thing we produce. We make nothing in Oklahoma. We ship it everywhere else to be made. We are the number one producer in gypsum in the country. And we don't make sheetrock here. Why? Because it's cheaper to ship that gypsum somewhere else that doesn't have our warehousing taxes. It's the same thing with iodine. We have the number 2 largest iodine production in the world, second to the nation of China. And we don't do anything with that iodine. We package it up and we ship it out to manufacture things with it elsewhere. Again, because our tax structure is so in favor of oil and gas that any other industry that tries to come in here is shouldering an unfair load. And, equal protection, guys. If we want to have a future in the state, we needed to start developing it 20 years ago, and it's getting to the point where it's almost too late.
So you bring up a very good point, because there's a common narrative going throughout this nation that, subsidizing local businesses is a good idea. But I think, as you just illustrated, that comes at a cost. When you're subsidizing, say, in your case, oil and gas, that's coming with higher taxes on other industries. So what you're really doing is just putting all your eggs in one basket. You're hurting other industries that could have the potential to thrive if they didn't have to deal with such high taxes in order to benefit these two industries. But what happens when those industries go away? What happens when they're no longer as profitable as they once were? Well, then you're out of luck. And then you put all your eggs in one basket, and you drop that basket, and you don't have anything else to fall back on.
How is this so obvious and yet they miss it? Like, are they willfully ignorant to the problem, or are they just completely ineffective at dealing with it?
It's willful ignorance, because oil and gas is what pays their paychecks. It's what gives them all of the legislator. It gives them all of their fringe benefits. It gives them their expensive lunches. It gives them donations for the next campaign cycle. So they've got to keep their oil and gas friends happy, or they're not going to be in office next year. It's that simple. That is the only reason that it doesn't happen, because everybody has known for 2 decades that Oklahoma was headed for bad economic times if we didn't expand our economy. It came out in a Bloomberg article. It's been studied repeatedly. And they just have refused to take action, because the longer they can delay it, the longer they're going to keep getting their donations and not have to seek new money. It's that simple. It really is. There is no other factor.
How do you fix that? Like, is it possible to fix it at this point? Like,
it absolutely is if you're running for governor, because Oklahoma has line item veto. If they want to get something by me, they've got to convince me that it is something for the benefit of all of Oklahoma. So once a libertarian gets elected into office, steps into that legislature, says, you know what, don't bother passing any more of your crappy bills, because I'm not going to sign them, and I know you don't have the votes to override the veto. So, you know what?
What is it to override?
75% here.
Wow, that is powerful.
And it is the same that is required to pass any revenue generating bill. And the legislature is trying to overturn that, but that got put on by state question. So only state question can overturn it.
Wow. So there is a state question basically a referendum or a...
Correct. Yes. Okay. That's our version of the referendum.
Okay.
Voted on by the people and put into law.
So the legislature was so bad that the people had to rise up and be like, okay, we're cutting you off a little bit here.
That's exactly what happened. We had Democrats in office 7 years in a row, and every year they increased their record spending and increased their record taxation.
When was this? Because I've always thought of Oklahoma as a very Republican state.
Between 8 and 15 years ago.
Okay.
In that 7-year time span, we were Democrat legislature and governor. Oklahoma has been Democrat for a large amount of their history.
Really?
It goes back to the very founding of the state. You know, we were a land rush state. Mm-hmm. So everybody that came here were libertarians. They wanted to live their life as they saw fit without interference of the government. Well, that level of disassociation allowed a group of progressives who at the time were of that old school progressive generation back in the early 1900s to come in and basically form a progressive style constitution and a progressive style government without the people even being aware that it was taking place, because they were land rush. They were out in the country raising their crops, living their lives. And that's something that Oklahoma has been fighting ever since, and it's only something that we've come to terms with and able to mount any stern defense against in probably the last decade.
So, how do I want to say this? So, for me, the biggest problem that we face as libertarians is we are predominantly fierce individualists, and getting everyone going in the same direction. You know, we talk about herding cats as the joke.
Right.
It sounds like your opposition there is very well organized, if completely stupid. How do you organize people who just want to be left alone?
Well, this is kind of a continuation of that conversation we just had. Our government has been so progressive for so long and encroached on our daily lives so much that those people recognize that they can no longer sit idly by. And they have just been waiting for a decade for someone to stand up and say, okay, I'll be your shield, get behind me, and let's march. And that's what we've seen. You know, early in the broadcast, we were talking about how, you know, we were just looking to keep ballot access from the beginning. But, you know, I came from the Republican Party most recently, and I haven't been a registered libertarian for long. I haven't been part of the movement for long. I've been a fierce, you would have called me a liberty Republican, is what you would have called me up until about 4 or 5 years ago. So I came from that environment. I know how to talk to the people on both sides of the aisle. And my message has been resonating with people on both sides of the aisle that are completely fed up with their own parties. And I have been what they were looking for. So I started getting a lot of support from outside the party. And once that happened, a lot of people started transferring to the party. We've risen almost 600% in a year is what our membership has grown. 600%. And along with that is all of the libertarians that have just been trying to hide out, being agorists, have said, hey, wait a second, we've got someone carrying the flag and they're making headway, and they have started coming out of the woodwork, and I have just been amazed by the level of support. You know, I've got 2 people running against me for the Libertarian nomination, and that being said, I still have more people following my Facebook page than we had registered libertarians a year ago. And
that is awesome.
Yeah, it's Oklahoma has been ripe for our movement for a long time. It's been a collection of a bunch of things coming together all at the same time that's created the perfect storm in Oklahoma. And then a lot of people.
Go ahead.
Well, it's about the Donald Trump effect, right? A lot of things came together completely unrelated to one another that created the perfect storm to allow someone like him to get elected to the presidency of the United States. And we're seeing the exact same climate take place, including all of the dynamics. Because, you know, everybody's saying libertarians can't win. We're having the media blackouts. We're having all of the media downplay. And some of the media has been very friendly, but, you know, it's some of the stuff that we're facing nationwide. But that the same stuff that hurt Gary Johnson is helping us in the same way it helped Donald Trump, because the climate here in Oklahoma is such that the people are paying attention now, and they are seeing how the system is being rigged against us and therefore against them. And it's making them mad, and they are rising up by the thousands.
This is a common theme I see in a lot of, you know, Great Plains states, that there is a very libertarian undertone to the way a lot of people in this part of the country think. And for a lot of people, they think that means that the Republican Party is their natural home.
Right.
But the more
government, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what the Republicans claim to be. You know, they did great marketing in that regard for convincing people that they're the party of low taxes, low spending, and limited government. Right. But I think the more people look under the hood, so to speak, and see what the Republican Party is really about, the more they're disgusted by it, the more they start looking for alternatives. And we're seeing this a lot in Nebraska, because a lot of people out in rural counties, which is most of the state, you get outside of Omaha and Lincoln, the entire state is rural farmlands. And those people just want to be left alone. Mm-hmm. You know, they don't want government taxing them to death. You know, they don't want government interfering with their lives. They just want to be left alone to live their own lives. And the Libertarian Party is the best party for that. So, I mean, we're seeing a huge rise in registered members. You guys are seeing a huge rise in registered members. And I think the reason for that is philosophically, a lot of people in plain states, especially in rural areas, have a libertarian mindset. So let's talk a little bit about the marijuana issue you brought up, because you brought that up as the third biggest issue that you were running on. Yeah. So go into that a little bit. Why is that issue number 3 on your platform?
For me, for the state of Oklahoma, it's a big deal right now because we have the medical marijuana initiative coming up on our ballot in June, the same day as the primary. And it's State Question 788, and it's medicinal marijuana use, cultivation, distribution, and use, if granted a prescription by a doctor for it, under limited medical conditions. It's a horrible law. It's way too restrictive for what we need. But it's seeing a lot of resistance here because they're actually saying, well, you can go get marijuana for anything. All you got to do is go get your card and get your doctor to say you have that, and it might as well be a recreational bill. I'm like, well, yeah, it might as well be a recreational bill. So let's go ahead and let's get recreational in here and just get it out of the way and, legitimize the whole thing, because we know that's where it's going anyway.
You know what? I'm going to be pretty peeved off if you darn Sooners get legalized marijuana before we do.
You're probably going to be peeved off because there's little doubt that it's actually going to pass.
Yeah, we've been having.
I told you, we're going to be the last state. We've
had senators pushing this. We've had senators pushing this for years, and it never happens. But it looks like you guys might actually have a shot in getting this passed.
Do you guys have a state initiative up there, or a referendum?
We do, but we have referendums, but it never passes.
We get this weird pushback from. I don't even know, like
from the establishment.
We get people who will vote against legalizing marijuana that smoke marijuana. It's like, I'm voting this way because I feel like I have to, and I feel guilty for the fact that I am high half the time. Like, why?
That's pretty harsh.
You see, it's the reason it might be is because they look at the prominent stoners in the state and go, I don't want more of that.
Oh, man.
The Mark Ellsworth.
Oh, yeah. No, we don't have that problem down here. We don't have high-profile drug users, but it's interesting because we did have a senator just last year who was one of the strongest anti-marijuana proponents and proposed some of the worst, most horrific anti-gay legislation I've ever seen, that got caught in a hotel room trafficking a minor male child and had weed in the room with him.
Of course, because...
And he's up on federal charges now.
Of course!
It's the guilt thing.
It is. Ralph Shorty. Look him up. It's a good story.
Yeah, it's amazing. A lot of these Puritans, they'll rant and rave about the dangers of marijuana or this or that or whatever. And turns out that they're not very good people themselves.
It's evil. You'll get the reefer madness.
Well, it's like, so I'm gonna draw on a little bit of personal experience here, and I'm not gonna out anyone necessarily, but in my experience, because when I was a teenager, I was studying to go into ministry, and in my experience, the youth pastors that would talk the most about being like sexual purity and waiting until you were married and this, that, and the other were the ones who were most likely to be banging one of their female students.
Yeah, it's often the case. The people who speak the loudest are the one that you need to watch. Most definitely. That's true in all segments of society. That's just human nature. As people feel more and more guilt and, worry that more and more people are going to discover their horrific secret, they get louder and louder in opposition to that. It works for a while, but leopard can't change his spots. Eventually, they get caught. Happens almost every time.
All right, so you guys think that you're actually going to get this, at least medical marijuana pass? Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to pass by a fairly wide margin. The Pro 788 crowd is very well organized, has been organized for years. And there are several prominent politicians that are also pushing it, including, all three Libertarian candidates, both Democratic candidates, and even a couple of the Republican candidates have said, yeah, that's probably what needs to happen because we don't need to be housing these people in our state prisons anymore.
Yeah, so for Nebraska, the benefits of legal marijuana are self-evident because it's a huge cash crop. And Nebraska's got some of the best farmland in the whole country. Mm-hmm. Legalizing it in this state would be a huge economic boom. Is that the case in Oklahoma? Because I know you were talking about starving agriculture.
Right.
Would this be helpful to change that?
It absolutely would. I think a lot of the data that's being pushed around about how huge of a benefit it's going to be is overstated because it doesn't account for the fact that, like Colorado in both of our cases already has recreational. So a lot of Colorado's benefits, something like 55% of their marijuana revenue comes from tourism, cannabis tourism. So it's something that we're going to see a more and more diminished effect of as more and more states see the light and start taking advantage of the opportunities. So I think that by the time everything is said and done, that the recreational cannabis use in Oklahoma would probably gather us between $60 and $70 million a year in revenue, which isn't near enough to make a dent in the deficit spending that we're running. But the other side of that, and I think this is even more of a benefit to you guys, is the industrial hemp, is because that is becoming more and more common in industrial use, and there's a much larger market for it. More of it will be used and consumed. And there are much more chains in the process because, once the industrial hemp is harvested, it has a fairly extensive and specific process that it has to go through to harvest the fibers for use. And it requires a factory, which means jobs. And then on top of that, it's used in textile industry, it's used in paper, it's used in rope, it's used in agriculture, it's used in landscaping, it's used in protein and food service. All of these different industries use it. So the more you grow, there's always going to be a market for it because it's there. And I think that's where we're going to see the real financial gains to the tune of, here in Oklahoma, $250 to $300 million a year, if we can get those ancillary industries in Oklahoma also. But we're only going to do that if we get our tax system leveled out. So it's a huge spider web of strings to pluck to get it all working right.
You're also going to be able to save a ton of money by being able to hire less cops and prison guards because, let's be honest,
about $160 million. That's how much we're going to save. 52% of our people in prison are in there for victimless crimes. And no, that's not all marijuana. Some of that is harder drugs, and I don't think we're going to get around that anytime soon. But we're going to take it one step at a time, and if someone's in jail on a victimless crime where they didn't hurt anybody, didn't hurt their property, I've already said I'm going to pardon them day one. I'm going to call the parole board and say, hey, give me the list of everybody. Have the paroles written. Just put them there for me to sign, and I'm going to be spending 3 days signing paroles.
So how would a pardon work? Because, is that still on their record so that they're going to apply for jobs and, well, I'm a con, is that because I've housed someone coming out of prison to help them get back on their feet, and it's not easy to get a job.
No, not even remotely. And it only is removed from their record. Now, to my understanding, there's a lot of legal conversation that takes place on both sides of this, but it's my understanding that anybody pardoned is not expunged, but they can be expunged if they go through the process. So yes, the felony is on their record, but to get it off of their record is a relatively simple process.
It's always good to get, because an issue like this would change the financial standing in Oklahoma quite a bit. Because right now you're spending a whole bunch of money enforcing laws against marijuana, whereas if you legalize it, you'll be making a bunch of money instead. And I know taxation is theft. Libertarians don't like taxes or anything like that, but it is a good feather in your hat when you're arguing with people who don't see things the way we do, which is say, hey, look at all the money that we'll be saving. Look at all the money that you can make as well. That's definitely a positive. There's no negative side to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the reason that everybody is starting to rally now is because, like we said right up front, a large part of the reason that we haven't had electoral success historically is messaging. We haven't known how to talk to people that don't believe or don't know the message of liberty yet. And having come from that background, I do know how to talk to these people. And the libertarians automatically assume it doesn't matter who you put up there in your candidacy, they're going to be rejected by the population. And now they're saying, oh, wait a second, people are listening, people are paying attention, people are showing up for this guy. They're starting to get enthused again. And at the same time, and it's something I look to Larry Sharp for guidance on this. He's come down to visit a couple times. He's done a couple of fundraisers for me, and we talk on occasion, and it is all about messaging. And, Larry is talking to a very, very blue state, and you don't get much redder than Oklahoma. We're talking to two entirely opposing demographics, But yet we have one thing in common, and that's the fact that we are appealing to the issues that those demographics want, using a libertarian message and libertarian principles. Because even though I'm not out there saying taxation is theft, I'm getting people to believe that they are losing the fruits of their labor unjustly and unconstitutionally, which is basically what the whole premise behind taxation is theft is. So if you can make that leap, if you can show how the two philosophies combine and where they meet, you can find that happy medium, and you can get everybody on board to make the changes that are necessary to let us all live free in our own lifetimes. And it's exciting to watch. It has nothing to do with me anymore. I'm nothing but a face. And it's all about the movement anymore. And it's not me carrying the movement. It's everybody else. I just show up where people tell me to.
Absolutely. Now, one of Larry Sharp's big things is promoting down ballot candidates.
Correct.
Do you guys have a lot of down ticket candidates running for legislature in Oklahoma?
Our filing date is April 11th to April 13th. Those are the only 4 days that you're allowed to, or the only 3 days that you're allowed to file. As of right now, we have a very small number, maybe 5 or 6 down ticket candidates that have, outwardly declared and are outwardly campaigning right now. I'm hopeful that we're going to have another 10 or so that pop up before April. And I'm in talking with a lot of people because I agree with Larry on that, because a lot of our successes are going to come at the local level first. And if I can use my platform at the state level to push my down ticket candidates, I'm going to, and I do it quite frequently. We've got 3 people that are running for House. 2 of them are paper candidates. We've got 1 who is now running for state auditor. It's a statewide election, and I'm going to be pushing him every chance I get. And we've had several people that have run for local offices, and I pushed them every chance I got. And so it's a give and take sort of thing. If your down ticket candidates are working with you, like you are working with them, they act as your eyes and ears on the ground in those remote locations. And so I've basically got a built-in another 4 volunteers from the 4 down ticket candidates I'm working with, because they are pushing me just as much locally as I'm lending them my informal authority on the state level. So yeah, it's extremely important.
So I have a question.
Yes.
We get this problem sometimes, and I see it a lot more nationally, so maybe it's not as big of an issue for you. As you were talking about the Libertarian Party in Oklahoma kind of is transforming into an actual political party. Are there people who are bitter about that? Because it seems like there are libertarians that just want this to be a debate club and
Yes, you are absolutely correct. The people that went to all the effort to get us organized had a faction of them that wanted us to be organized just so we had the legitimacy of ballot access. So when they were pushing their activist positions, it lent some formal credibility to those positions. And that was their intent all along. Part of their strategy was to form affinity clubs, which were basically just forming little clubs like coffee shop groups or quilting groups or scrapping groups, to where people could get together and educate each other one-on-one and find some solidarity and some spine in your own local area to push local area issues. And once then, a lot more of us came in. This is back in the days when there were only 50 registered libertarians, right? And then once we got up there to that 700 mark after the end of the first year, a lot more of us were like, no, we're going to push this. We're going to ride this horse as far as we can. And there was a good 6 months of harsh back and forth between party leadership and the people who had since registered as libertarians about the direction that we were going to take the party as a whole in the future. So there is a lot of resentment. There are a few people, a handful here in Oklahoma today, that are extremely resentful of me for calling them out on actively working against the Libertarian Party. And I made some real enemies out of them. And, if I would have known I was going to be running for governor, I probably would have handled that whole thing differently for the sake of unity, right? because no matter how divided we are, we have to present a unified front in front of the enemy, which are the two old parties and the duopoly and the establishment. So, I made a tactical mistake on that in the way I handled the whole situation, but at the same time, they were already predisposed to hate me because I was one of the loudest proponents for pushing this forward, as a full-scale political movement. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Outside of, the fringe libertarians, it sounds like all the things that you want to do has to make you public enemy number one of every union in your state. What
you would think. It's not exactly the case.
Really?
When I started, I was a union worker. I was Communications Workers of America in Tulsa. I worked for AT&T. I was a union guy. And at the same time, I'm not opposed to unions. I'm not trying to get rid of unions. We're a right-to-work state. If people want to associate with the union, that's their right. If people want to form any type of workers' organization, that's their right as workers and individuals. That's part of libertarianism, free association. So there's really no union work that I would have to do here because we're already a strong right-to-work state. Some of the unions are unhappy with me, like the teachers union is unhappy with me because I strongly disagree with their plans. They think in order to get what they want that we have to raise a $1.4 billion tax package. That's not the case. I don't publish it as part of my campaign stuff, but here in just a general conversation, when I have looked at the entire state organization, I believe that I can save between $4 and $5 billion, between 20 and 25% of our budget, and not cut a single program. Not cut a single program. So when they're talking about needing to raise all this revenue and the only way to do it is through taxation, they've got the right problems and they've got the right solutions, but the wrong mechanisms for getting there. For instance, they want to raise the gross production tax on the oil and gas industry to 5% as part of this demand. There are some people calling for as high as a raise of 10%. Well, they've got the right problem there, but they've got the wrong reason for it. The greatest benefit that we get out of raising the gross production tax to 5 to 7% isn't going to be the increased revenue. It's going to be taking the work or the tax load off of the other industries so that the rest of industries thrive. And as we have that exponential economic growth, our revenues are going to increase organically while we're lowering tax rates. Just because we are so far down in the hole, we've got so far to climb that the growth is going to be incredible. And we've got numerous examples throughout American economic history to point to where this came, for instance, through the industrialization era, just to take one that most people know about. When we went through that era, that technological development revolutionized the way business was going to be done, just like fixing our tax code in Oklahoma is going to revolutionize the way business is done in the state of Oklahoma. So at the end of the day, before the end of my first term, I'm going to wind up lowering taxes, and we are going to be setting record revenues just from the economic expansion from raising that tax. So they've got some of the right ideas, but for entirely the wrong reasons. And they don't anticipate the positive and negative outcomes that are coming from this plan, because the rest of their plan is to tax the poor. They want cigarette and gas taxes. Everybody has to drive to work. Poor people, by and large, are the ones that smoke. So we're going to tax the people that are suffering the most economically in the state under the auspices of helping their children. That's crap. And I haven't been shy about my opposition to that and telling them I can give you everything that you are asking for, and I can do it without raising a single tax. And they don't like that because it steals their credibility. So some of the unions that I've had to go head-to-head with, yeah, they don't like me. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be their best friend because I'm the one that's going to give them what they want.
Yep, we would all like to see lower taxes and more fiscal responsibility out of our government.
True.
It'd be great if our government was actually, would actually take some care with their money that they're forcing us to give them.
Right.
They would actually act responsibly with it. But whether it's the federal government or state governments,
or
it always turns out Yeah, it always turns out that they're not.
Right.
Hey, Nathan, did you see what we shared on our state page today? Because that kind of ties in. So you were, Rex, you were talking about taxing the poorest people, basically.
Right.
In Omaha, there are a couple city councilors proposing a 5 to 10 cent per plastic bag tax at the grocery store for Omaha. Like, that's directly a tax on the poorest people, because that's going to hit Walmart shoppers, not Whole Foods shoppers.
Right. That's it baffles me, because I know you guys are in a little bit better economic condition than we are, but you are still a marginal state when it comes to income.
Marginal.
Yeah. You've been marginalized.
And Zach, I bet you're happy, Zach, that you moved just like a block south of Omaha. That's what's going on.
Definitely be hitting the Walmart in Bellevue if that crap goes. Although I have a Costco membership, and now we're going to be really close to a Costco, so they don't even use bags.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. So so you talked about education. You talked about the medical marijuana and stuff. There was another issue. What was the other issue?
The economy diversity.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's what it was. And then you said you hit that. You hit the criminal justice reform. I think we've hit about everything.
We did all the major issues. There's a lot of side issues too, like transparency and accountability. We were talking about unintended consequences, and how the legislature doesn't take care of it. And those are another two good issues. But yeah, those are in my platform as well. I've got a pretty comprehensive platform, and that's part of what is appealing to the people outside of the party, is that I am plucking all those critical strings, and I'm paying attention to the inner workings, and I'm paying attention to the peripheral consequences to the policies that I'm proposing. So
if people want to learn more about you, if they want to volunteer for you or donate to your campaign, how would they go about doing that?
Go to my Facebook page, Rex for Governor 2018. It's real easy to find. It's the only one that comes up. There's a donate link on there. It takes you straight to my antidote page. I would really appreciate anything that you could give me. Money's been flowing in pretty good the last couple weeks, but we need a lot. If we could get $100,000, even though the old parties are going to be spending about $2 million on this race, I think we can win it with $100,000. And that's just because we're not wasting our money. And we've got a really strong grassroots organization.
Do you have poll numbers yet? Do you have any idea kind of where you're sitting?
The polls are not acknowledging the Libertarian candidates as of yet. There have been unofficial straw polls taken in various corners, and I'm finishing pretty strongly. And the most recent one was on the 788 page. I finished third out of the 12 candidates behind the two Democratic candidates.
Okay.
And
you finished in front of the Republican candidates then?
Yes, all of them.
So how many Republicans are running? Is that kind of 6. Like this? Okay.
There are 6 Republicans, 3 Libertarians, and 2 Democrats running. Okay. And I finished third behind the 2 Democrats.
So you're feeling pretty confident, at least in your primary?
Yes. Anything can happen. You never know what's going to happen till Election Day. But as it sits right now, of the activists who have been active in the state for a long time, most of them, probably 60% of them are supporting me. My primary competitor, who is also a Libertarian, has got a following as well. He's been active with the state party for 20 plus years. He's a former state chair. He doesn't evoke the enthusiasm that I do, doesn't evoke the passion. So his grassroots organization didn't take off nearly as strongly as I did. So I got to the vast majority of new Libertarians first. And, sometimes that's what determines who wins the game. Yeah. And the third candidate's not even really a Libertarian. He's way off the tables. He's Vermin Supreme on steroids. So...
Yeah, we had one of those here running for Senate not too long ago.
Yeah, we had to primary essentially a Green Party candidate that was running as a Libertarian.
trying to steal your access. That's the same thing that our third one's trying to do. He's trying to promote his President 2020 run. That's what he's doing.
That's basically what our guy was doing. Wow. So we understand your struggle.
Seriously, you feel my pain, and it's been really, really difficult. It's hard trying to run a legitimate campaign when, one, you're having to do damage control just from the message because of people like him, and then two, having to fight the cognitive dissonance of the general public as well.
Yeah.
For the sake of fairness, everybody, Rex Lawhorn asked us to come on the show, and we allowed him the platform to speak his views. If there's other candidates in Oklahoma that want to come on the show and speak their mind and promote their own candidacy, we'd be happy to have you on as well. So
yeah, absolutely. I'll give you guys to Chris.
Yeah, we're not picking sides in any primary here. We want to give as many libertarian candidates a platform and airtime as we can.
So here's the thing, and I've said this in a lot of different the delegate groups and all that. We are not bound to be impartial. Mike endorsed Joshua Smith for chair. I haven't really been a secret that I'm supporting him as well. This is our platform. Rex sounds like a great candidate to me, and if he's got the best chance of winning on top of being really solid on the issues, I don't see a reason why we wouldn't lean that way. But we would at least give people a chance to make their voices heard.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I didn't realize that you guys didn't know that there was a primary going on down here. I would have said something about that up front.
It doesn't really matter to me.
Like that. Okay.
But
it
doesn't matter.
And I'll even say their names: Chris Powell and Joe Maldonado, otherwise known as Joe Exotic, are the other two running down here. And
is he a porn star or something?
Joe Exotic.
I'm not even going to get into that discussion at this point.
Oh dear.
He's the third wheel that you were talking about.
Yeah, it's turned into a nightmare. We had a good working relationship up front, and I thought we were going to be able to turn him into at least a responsible, respectable candidate, at least from an issues perspective.
Oh, he's this guy. Okay.
Yeah.
I know who we're talking about. Oh, my God.
And so there's a lot that has been happening. And, as he realized that I was going to keep him because he doesn't have a snowball's chance of winning the primary.
Mm-hmm.
And as that has become more and more aware that he recognizes that the Libertarian Party closed their primary, and that got rid of the crazy vote, and that upset him greatly. And
we had to do that too.
Decided he doesn't like me anymore. And the funny thing is we didn't even do it because of him, because at the time I was still operating under the premise that he was going to be a good candidate. He was going to be someone that the party could use to put out a good libertarian message. So I wasn't even concerned about that when the question came up, are we going to open or close our primary? I was more concerned about some of the outsider candidates from the Democrat or Republican Party that have no chance to win their nomination because they don't have the establishment support. I was worried about one of them coming and trying to steal and then running a Democrat or Republican platform.
Like what's going on in Texas?
Like what's going on in Texas. I foresaw that issue before it ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen it in several places across the nation. So that when I was arguing for a closed primary, I didn't know that I was saving us from Joe.
Yeah, it's the thing. We're cursed right now. We're big enough to secure major party status or at least ballot access in most of these states.
Right.
We are not exactly big enough to stave off a major coup attempt from one of the other parties trying to destroy our message.
Right.
So we basically I hate the fact that we have to close our primaries, but it's just survival. 4 years from now, hopefully we don't have to anymore. But
right. And while we're talking about the primaries, I wanted to bring up the point that there are many states in the country where you're going to have a primary, or at least your candidate needs to be certified. And in order for you to vote in that primary in most states, you're going to have to register as a libertarian. So pay attention to when your deadline is and don't push it off. It's very important if you want to see the Libertarians go forward that you give support to your Libertarian candidates at any level, state, county, local, or even your national candidates. If you can get involved, because we are at a turning point when we are going to start making the difference. And it's critical that you let your voice be heard.
So you're playing to win this one.
No question.
Okay. So typically the question that we ask someone is, well, what does success look like? So if for you it's victory, what's the bare minimum like you will feel like it's a complete failure if you're below a certain point?
If we are below 10 to 15%, I will feel like it's a complete failure.
Okay, that's a high
bar.
bar.
3%, we win.
Yeah.
We're not a plurality state. We are a majority state. So it'll go top 2 to the second ballot. And if we get to the second ballot, I win. Because there is no Democrat in Oklahoma that's going to vote for a Republican. And there are very few Republicans in Oklahoma that's going to vote for a Democrat. Okay,
so explain that again. So whoever wins, you guys have runoffs. That's what you're saying.
Right. Yeah,
okay.
It's a 3-way race. And some states, the plurality wins, right? Whoever gets the highest total wins. So you can win an election with a 34% margin of victory if your other two only get 33. That's not the case in Oklahoma. It's 50 plus 1. So if we keep anybody from getting to 50% and we are one of the top 2, we win. Period.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And there's a good chance of that.
Yeah, it sounds. I've asked about all the questions I could think of. We could go into tiny issues, but I think we've hit about everything. Is there anything you want to say kind of going away here?
I just want to thank you guys for having me on, and thank you for putting out the message you do. Roads to Liberty needs to be heard by a lot more people because you put a good message forward that's relatable to the population at large. And that's what the message that I want to push to all of my Libertarian brothers and sisters all across the country. It's like, I get it. I totally get it. Arvin Vohra was mad at me for coming down on him after we had a face-to-face conversation because he discovered that I'm actually more radical than he is. The difference between he and I is I talk to everybody. I don't talk to libertarians.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something important that you guys have to recognize. When you are talking to the public at large, talk to them in a way that they can understand. Because if you can't get past the first sentence without turning them off, they're never going to hear the rest of it. So Definitely. Take a good pragmatic message. Talk to anybody you can. Talk to everybody. Win hearts and minds one at a time. That's how we get it done. Rise of the Libertarians.
Definitely.
Absolutely, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on the program. This was a very fun and enlightening conversation. We wish you well in your primary and in the general election to follow.
Thank you,
Good luck, man. I hope you do well.
I hope so, too. Thanks, guys.
Yep. So that's been Rex Lawhorn running for governor of Oklahoma. For Nathan Parada, I'm Zach Taylor. Have a great week.